According to the Innocence Project, 362 people in the United States have been exonerated by DNA testing. Did you know that 1 in 25 defendants who are sentenced to death in the United States is actually innocent? According to the Washington Post, the vast majority of innocent defendants who are convicted of crimes are never identified and cleared. In fact, these people served an average of 14 years in prison before exoneration and release. Just because someone is found innocent doesn't mean that their life is back to normal. Many times, the wrongfully convicted find themselves struggling for employment, divorced, or battling for custody of their children. The damage to their lives and reputation is often beyond repair or repayment. The same issues apply to law enforcement officers. According to CNN, since 2005, more than 80 police officers were arrested on murder or manslaughter charges for on-duty shootings. Yet, only about 35% of them were found guilty and convicted. The 65% who were found innocent still had damage to their careers that in many cases was beyond repair. Everyone deserves the right to a fair trial with proper representation. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll interview a world-class criminal defense attorney and 2 law enforcement officers, one of which was wrongfully accused of a crime they didn't commit, and another who was wrongfully accused of professional misconduct. All of this when we return. Stay tuned. We're here with James Payne, a criminal defense attorney with decades of experience who's represented some very interesting clients, stories that you've seen in the news, defendants who were not guilty yet charged with crimes. I think it's an amazing story that I really want to talk about today. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chuck. Good to be here.
Oftentimes, you hear people say, why are you representing that guy? He did this or he did that. But nobody really knows because they haven't been adjudicated in a court of law. So tell me about advocacy, client advocacy.
The criminal defense attorney forms part of the bedrock of the stability of our society. It is important for everybody to know once they become charged, or should one of their loved ones perhaps maybe become charged with a crime that they did not commit, they want to be able to know that they will have somebody stand up beside them that they can entrust implicitly with their life.
Sure.
To ensure that they get all the fairness that our criminal justice system provides, because once that trust and confidence is gone, then our society will have the pain to suffer a loss of confidence, and that means that we become a lawless society.
Now, you've defended defendants who were charged with very serious felonies, murder in fact.
Oh, absolutely.
What's that like to interview somebody that's charged with murder? I'm thinking in particular about a police officer, Brian, who was charged with murder. Tell me about that case.
Technically, he was charged with manslaughter, not murder. That's a legal distinction, but important for us lawyers.
Okay.
But still charged with a homicide.
Yes.
First of all, you have to suspend judgment. Many times, lawyers that do this for a living are asked, well, how can you defend somebody that you know or that tells you that they did something bad? How can you do that? That goes back again to the bedrock of our criminal justice system. If you are a loved one should ever be charged, you want to know that you can bare your soul in confidence to your lawyer, and that information is important to your liberty or to the fact that you get a fair shake in the justice system.
I'm a defendant and I come to you and I'm really frightened. I'm charged with a serious crime. And you talk to the prosecutor and they say, oh, we'll let Whitlock off with 5 years. But I stand to get 20 or 30 years if I go to trial. Even if I'm innocent, aren't I tempted to take that offer?
Well, you raise a couple different issues. Yes, you are tempted to take that offer. Every defendant has to judge for themselves whether they will try to take a plea bargain, which is, in short terms, an agreement between you and the state and the court that in exchange for you pleading to a particular charge and perhaps a particular sentence, the more serious charges will go away. Every lawyer is duty bound to determine if there is such a non-trial resolution available for his or her client.
Sure.
You're duty bound to do that. Where the line can get crossed, however, is that a lawyer could not go into court with a client and say, you're going to admit to something you didn't do just to get a deal. Can't do that.
Right.
So there's the difference.
I don't know how you navigate all of this. I admire the work that you do, I have to tell you, James Payne.
Oh, thank you.
You have lives in your hands, and it's got to be, you have to be faced with some pretty tough decisions doing what you do every day.
You are faced every single day.
We're going to take a short commercial break for our sponsors. When we return, we're going to hear from two of James Payne's professionally exonerated clients, law enforcement officers who were acquitted. Stay tuned. Okay, we're back with James Payne, criminal attorney, defense attorney, and one of your past clients, Brian Vassy. Now, Brian, you were a police officer, and you were involved in a shooting. Tell me about that. Tell me what happened.
Well, I received a call from a Bowling Spring Lakes unit, and he requested my assistance. I immediately, based upon a mutual aid agreement, started traveling his way. I was advised that he was dealing with a mental patient that was armed and confrontational. I got on scene, made safe entry into the home. I saw that there were two officers to the left standing in a hallway, and there was a mother and father to the right. The suspect ran into the bathroom of the residence, immediately came out and was running towards law enforcement officers with a cobalt pick in his hand. He raised that weapon and was tased. Bowling Spring Lakes officer went down to try to handcuff this individual and restrain him and was unsuccessful. The subject began to push off the floor, and when he did that, the other officer got in a struggle with him to try to restrain him. He got loose from him, and he attempted to stab him, and I had to stop him.
Shortly thereafter, Officer Vassy is charged with a crime, manslaughter.
That's correct.
Now what happens?
When he is charged with manslaughter, then his defense has to kick into full gear to prepare to defend him based upon rules that are unique to law enforcement officers. When a law enforcement officer believes that another is in imminent apprehension of death or serious bodily injury, he has a duty to employ deadly force. Brian found himself executing his duty and then being criminally charged for doing what he was supposed to do.
Now, subsequently, he was acquitted for this.
Yes, sir.
What happened then, Brian?
This incident turned my life upside down in a way that the average person could not possibly understand or comprehend. I've received death threats, threatening phone calls, public confrontation. I basically had to become this hypervigilant individual to protect the safety of myself and my family.
So what's happened to your life since then? This was 3 years ago, 4 years ago? What's going on now?
At one point I had my dreams come true. I was able to become a law enforcement officer. I enjoyed that job. I look forward to going to work every day. To being confronted with a situation such as this, causing me to lose a career that meant the world to me.
if I'm a police officer and I'm watching this, I might hesitate to pull my weapon and protect a fellow police officer if I think I'm going to be charged with manslaughter.
If I were a person that wanted to come into the law enforcement field, I would recommend that they follow their heart and do what they feel like is right. That sometimes you have to deal with these incidents. You have to take it one step at a time and follow your heart.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm really glad that you had James Payne defending you.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
And I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing the aftermath of a shooting. We read about it in the newspaper. You're not allowed to talk about it because I'm sure your attorney is saying, don't say anything. But the victim's family and other people, they're talking about it. So the public is getting generally one side of the story and during the whole process. So your family has to deal with the trauma of it, with everybody thinking whatever the misinformation is that's being put out there, because you can't really defend yourself until you go to trial.
That's right.
And then you go to trial and you're acquitted by a peer of your, actually by a judge.
That's correct.
Folks, when we come back, we have another officer that we're going to talk to who was wrongfully charged and ran the risk of losing her badge and maybe never being able to be a police officer the rest of her life. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Now we're with Jessica Sadovnikov, who is a police officer, a deputy sheriff.
Yes, sir.
And tell me about your story. You ran the risk of losing your ability to be a police officer. Tell me what happened.
So I started my employment with the Sheriff's Office, Scotland County Sheriff's Office, in 2015 after the election of our sheriff. Shortly after, this is probably about a year and a half after I came to work for the sheriff. The charges actually stemmed from another law enforcement officer that I worked with inside of the agency, and it kind of perpetuated from there. Okay. So there was a situation during the presidential election. I was off duty in my own personal time, and I had a personal Facebook account. I was actually commenting on a video that was shared publicly through the network CNN. It was regarding the Hillary Clinton defeat, obviously.
Yes.
And this video in particular was actually showing some riots and protesters that ensued afterwards. While I'm clearly and wholeheartedly an advocate and full support of the right to peacefully assemble and protest,
of course.
This particular group of individuals were students at a particular college or university in Oregon. Mm-hmm. It had erupted into such a volatile and violent manner that they were actually defacing and destroying the property of their own school. And I was so disturbed by this, and I did make a public post on Facebook. Well, public, I meaning shareable to my friends.
Right.
And I commented on it. My message was clearly a message of unity. It was a message of the divisiveness that I believe is permeating in our society right now.
Yes.
Regardless of what political ideology you identify with.
Sure.
I was just kind of frustrated type of post, perhaps a bit of ranting, of, I'm just exhaustion of, the back and forth between the sides, and I feel like we're one country, we're one people. The verbiage that I utilized was later taken out of context and said to be racist and discriminatory against African Americans. And I was like, wait a second, what are you talking about? I was like, I wasn't talking about that at all. I was talking about a group of primarily Caucasian students at an Oregon college who were lighting on fire cars and destroying their own school. I was like, there was not a single African American in the video. I was like, so where did that come from? That was one of the accusations, though. It was that I was inherently racist. I must be racist because of that particular comment. The second allegation was untruthfulness and integrity-driven issues. Throughout the course of my career at the Scotland County Sheriff's Office, I've predominantly handled juvenile and sexual crimes. Any type of crime involving a juvenile offender or any crime involving sexual or physical, emotional abuse against a child. That's primarily what my purpose is in investigations. I handled an investigation where I did charge an offender. That particular offender was charged with a pretty high number of felony charges involving a number of juvenile victims. This individual was charged and accused primarily of child rape. Okay. This individual, subsequently the case has already been tried, heard, and disposed of in court, so I'm little more comfortable talking about it. But he did plea. He accepted a plea bargain. His case immediately was transferred to Superior Court. There was no speculation as to the nature of my investigation or the validity of my investigation. The accusation was that I coerced the victim, one of the victims, into making a statement. And it was the defense counsel who raised that concern, that one of the victims inherently only made this accusation against the defendant because I coerced him.
Sure.
Which was false. But it was things like that, and it was like a number. It was basically, it felt like just nitpicking any little thing that we could. I think this particular officer was motivated by some other individuals on the outside who no longer held employment with the sheriff's office once the administrative change occurred. So I think there was a bit of a personal thing there, but like I talked about before, I don't think it was personal attack against me. I think it was a collective effort to illegitimize the new administration and for political purposes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So, James, how do you respond to this in a hearing situation? I mean, it seems obvious to me that these were vicious attacks impugning her integrity.
I would say that Deputy Sadovnikov's plight is a typical example of what white-collar criminal defense attorneys do. You don't just defend folks who are charged with violent crimes, but you defend professional law enforcement officers, people with integrity. Even if it's not in a courtroom, it's in a court of some other opinion.
Yes.
That
And the consequences can be just as severe.
destroy a career.
For example, in Jessica's case,
Exactly.
destroy her entire career.
And so the same principles, though, apply, Chuck, in that, as we discussed earlier, the job of that lawyer is to get to know this person personally and to know everything about her, and so that when we work together, we work as a team, and to be able to go in on her behalf and speak to the folks who are making decisions on her. That's what the advocate does.
Yes.
And the advocacy begins not when you walk into a hearing room, but when the client comes in the door.
So now you're the head of detectives for the sheriff's department.
Yes, and it's been a blessing, and it's been a long road, but it's phenomenal. Last year alone, I was actually the lieutenant, so second commander of the agency, or over the criminal investigative division.
Yes.
We worked diligently. We built an exceptional team full of a variety of different backgrounds, demographics, education, training, and we just hit it hard. We actually reduced crime by 72% last year alone. So that was the recent statistic that came out. I personally handled juvenile and sexual assault allegations in the community. That crime solvability increased by 180%. So
Fabulous.
Yes. So it's been a long road. It's been a very blessed one, and I'm very thankful to have been given the opportunity not only to have James as representation, that he was able to serve a law enforcement officer in such a capacity, but also to retain my career.
And I'm so glad you
on.
retained your career.
Yes.
I mean, look at these promotions. You're doing a great job. It would have been a great disservice to the community to have lost you. We're running out of time, Jessica, but I want to close this by telling both of you something. I am so grateful that we have officers like you on the job. And if I had a criminal issue, you're the first one I'd want to call. And I want to thank you for keeping officers like Jessica on the job. You're doing a wonderful job, James.
It's my honor to do it.
Thank you,
It's my honor
so
to do
much.
it.
I can see that. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
For
It's a pleasure meeting you.
My pleasure.
Yes.
With wrongful conviction and false imprisonment having such frightening statistics, proper legal counsel is more important than ever before. Civilians and law enforcement alike are convicted of crimes each and every day. Our judicial system is supposed to filter out the innocent from the guilty. But like any other system, it isn't perfect. It can be estimated that hundreds of innocent people are in prison for crimes they didn't commit. And our tax dollars are paying for it. In many cases, the wrongfully convicted experience irreparable damage to their careers, reputation, and personal relationships. If you find yourself in trouble from a crime you didn't commit, call an attorney you can trust. That's all for today on What's the Matter. I'm Chuck Whitlock. And remember, if it matters to you, it matters to us. See you next time.